Please note that in the YouTube description we have links to Discord, Patreon, and the sources that I referenced to be able to make this video. Joseph Louis Lagrange was an Italian-born French mathematician and astronomer, primarily during the 18th century. He made significant contributions to mathematical analysis, number theory, and mechanics. Amongst his many contributions, he's notable for being one of the creators of the calculus of variations, Lagrange's theorem, and Lagrangian mechanics. Lagrange was born January 25, 1736, in Turin, Italy, under the name Giuseppe Lodovico Lagrangia. In his teens, he preferred to sign his surname as Lagrange, and mostly stuck with this for the rest of his life. His father, whom he got his French heritage from, was Giuseppe Francesco Lodovico Lagrangia, a treasurer in the Office of Public Works and Fortifications in Turin, who had a PhD in law from the University of Turin, and his mother was Teresa Grosso, the only child of a wealthy physician in Cambiano. Lagrange had 10 other siblings, but only one of them survived to adulthood, and when Lagrange was still quite young, he witnessed his family's wealth disappear due to some poor decision-making from his father. Not much is known about his early education, but Lagrange did attend the University of Turin. Initially, the plan was to become a lawyer, per his father's request, which Lagrange accepted without issue, and he didn't seem to show any real interest in mathematics. It wasn't until the age of 17 that Lagrange gained interest in mathematics, when he stumbled upon a paper on algebra in optics. The paper was written by Edmund Halley, a 16th and 17th century English mathematician and physicist, notable for aiding in the proofs of Newton's laws of motion. Between that paper and the remarkable teaching from physics professors at the university, Lagrange wished to pursue mathematics at a much deeper level. He spent the next year without any real guidance, giving himself the ultimate crash course, and ended the year being phenomenal at mathematics, thus ditching his career path of becoming a lawyer. In July of 1754, Lagrange wrote a letter consisting of work he wished to publish to two mathematicians, Leonhard Euler, an 18th century Swiss mathematician considered to be the most prolific mathematician to ever exist, and Giulio Fagnano, a primarily 18th century Italian mathematician notable for working on complex number theory and geometry. The work, which Lagrange ended up publishing in Italian, drew an analogy between the binomial theorem and successive derivatives of the product of functions. The work was rather rough, highlighting Lagrange's mathematical isolation, and unfortunately, the month after he'd released his results, found his work had already been done in a published correspondence between Johann Bernoulli and Leibniz. Fearing he'd be labeled a thief, Lagrange doubled down on producing original work. By the end of 1754, he'd made important discoveries on the tautochrone, a curve in which a weighted particle, independent of its initial position, will always arrive at a fixed point in the same time. Within the work, Lagrange had devised a method of maximizing and minimizing functionals, and he sent this work to Euler. Their correspondence on this matter, consisting of letters between 1754 and 1756, eventually led to the creation of the Euler-Lagrange equation. Euler apparently enjoyed Lagrange's work so much that he tried persuading Lagrange to come work with him in Berlin. Alas, Lagrange was not ready to move from Turin just yet. Lagrange never finished university, but his mathematical prowess was so dense that he was appointed to teach mathematics at the Royal Military Academy of Theory and Practice of Artillery in 1755. He taught courses in calculus and mechanics, and was in fact the first to teach calculus in an engineering school. Alas, Lagrange's teaching style was not received well, and he apparently was not very patient with applications to artillery and fortification engineering. Luckily, Lagrange had at least one fan, a pupil of his named François Davier, an 18th century French mathematician and military officer. The pair were frustrated with how stuffy the scientific attitudes were in Turin, and wished they had their own place to cultivate research more freely, which led to them creating the Turin Society in 1758, and became the Turin Royal Academy of Sciences in 1783. Lagrange and Davier also received help in the formation of the society from Giovanni Francesco Cigna, a physician and chemist notable for working in electrology, and Giuseppe Angelo Saluzzo, a general and chemist notable for being one of the first Italian gas chemists. Starting in 1759, Lagrange published a few volumes of his research through the Society's journal, Mélanges de Turin. The first volume consisted of physics results, such as a paper on sound propagation, pointing to an error made by Newton, and a complete solution to a problem on the theory of vibrating strings. He used a discrete mass model for his vibrating string, which consisted of n masses joined by weightless strings, yielding a system of n plus 1 differential equations, which he solved. He then let n tend to infinity, leading to the same functional solution that Euler had derived. The second volume, published in 1762, introduced the theory and notation of the calculus of variations. Lagrange illustrates its use by deducing the principle of least action and solutions of various problems in dynamics. Apparently, Euler could have published his own results on this earlier, but he was so impressed with Lagrange's work that he decided against doing so. The third volume, published in 1767, consisted of problems and methods used to solve systems of linear differential equations, using the characteristic value of linear substitutions for the first time, solutions to several dynamical problems using the calculus of variations, and a solution to the following Fermat conjecture. Given an integer n, which is not a perfect square, find a number x such that nx squared plus 1 is a perfect square. Later contributions consisted of a discussion on joining the results of numerous astronomical observations together, a paper on pressure exerted by fluids in motion, and a paper on integration by way of infinite series, with examples. By 1761, Lagrange was pretty renowned as a mathematician, so that was good, but his health was in a very poor state due to the mathematical grind he'd put himself through over the previous 9 years. He ended up taking a much-needed rest for a bit, recommended by a doctor, but the damage he'd done to his nervous system profoundly affected him for the remainder of his life. In 1764, Lagrange produced work on the libration of the moon, as well as an explanation as to why the same face was always turned to Earth. This paper yielded Lagrange's first use of virtual work, which is defined as the total work done by the applied forces and the inertial forces of a mechanical system as it moves through a set of virtual displacements. This naturally arose from Lagrange's study of the principle of least action, which he originally thought was all that would be needed to build the foundation for all of mechanics. The paper also planted the seed for the idea of the generalized equations of motion, which Lagrange formally proved in 1780. In 1765, Lagrange received a letter from Jean Le Rond d'Alembert, an 18th century French polymath notable for obtaining solutions to the wave equation and providing the first attempted proof of the fundamental theorem of algebra. D'Alembert was insulted by the lack of attention he felt Turin was giving Lagrange, and requested on behalf of Frederick II that he come to Berlin Academy. Again, Lagrange declined, stating at this point that he didn't want to work at the Academy while Euler was still there. He feared he'd just be working in Euler's shadow. In 1766, Euler left Berlin to go back to St. Petersburg, and Frederick II personally wrote to Lagrange that he'd love to have him finally come to Berlin as the director of mathematics, to which Lagrange graciously accepted, especially excited that he would only be focusing on research and not have to teach. The decision left regret for Turin, and they tried to get Lagrange to come back to Turin from time to time for the remainder of his life. Even though he never returned, Lagrange still published results with them every so often. In 1767, just before moving to Berlin, Lagrange married his cousin, Vittoria Conti. The pair never had children together, since Lagrange didn't want any. Upon arriving in Berlin, Frederick II was ecstatic about Lagrange being there, as were a few others whom Lagrange became close friends with, which included Johann Heinrich Lambert, an 18th century Swiss polymath, notable for being the first to introduce hyperbolic functions in geometry, and Johann Bernoulli III, an 18th century Swiss mathematician, notable more for his travels in Germany than for his mathematical contributions. Not everyone was pleased, though, as Lagrange's position was quite prestigious for his young age. A good example of this is Johann Castillon, an 18th century mathematician notable for doing work on the cardioid. He felt more entitled to the position than Lagrange, and had a lot of resentment toward Lagrange because of this. Despite any animosity Lagrange may have experienced, this didn't stop him from being incredibly productive during his time at the Academy. He produced between 100 to 200 papers on a mixture of subjects, from mathematics to celestial mechanics, and published results through the University of Turin, Berlin Academy, and the French Academy. Notable pieces of work include Thoughts on the Algebraic Solution of Equations, published in 1770, which studied why equations of degree less than or equal to 4 could be solved using radicals. Essay on the Three-Body Problem, published in 1772, which Lagrange considered a situation in which there are two relatively high-mass objects orbiting a mutual center of gravity, and calculated the gravitational potential. And Mécanique Analytique, a 2-volume work that Lagrange had worked on for over 25 years that deduced all of mechanics through the concept of virtual work and the calculus of variations, published between 1788 and 1789 after Lagrange left Berlin. In Thoughts on the Algebraic Solution of Equations, Lagrange was the first to consider the roots of an equation as abstract quantities instead of numerical, and he studied the permutations of roots, stating that if a polynomial in n variables has its variables permuted n factorial ways, the number of different polynomials that are obtained is always a factor of n factorial. With the later development of abstract groups, this result extended to what is now known as Lagrange's theorem in group theory, which states that a subgroup's order must always divide the order of a group exactly. In Essay on the Three-Body Problem, Lagrange introduced Lagrangian points, 5 orbital points, typically labeled L1 through L5, near two large co-orbiting bodies where at each point, the gravitational forces of the two bodies and centripetal force balance each other out. In Mécanique Analytique, Lagrange was proud to say the work had no diagrams at all, and remarked that he felt mechanics was really a branch of pure mathematics, analogous to the geometry of 4 dimensions. The work introduced the method of generalized coordinates, which are a set of parameters that describe the configuration of a system with respect to some reference configuration. And he even used Lagrange multipliers, which is a powerful optimization method for finding the local extrema of a function subject to equality constraints, though he didn't flesh out Lagrange multipliers until a later work. Between 1772 and 1785, Lagrange also contributed a number of papers that were highly significant in the development of partial differential equations. Given Lagrange's productivity, it's important to mention again that his health was in a pretty poor state, and while in Berlin, he experimented on himself, trying to find the maximum amount of work he could do before crashing, so he wasn't really sleeping. His wife's health was in an even worse state, and this led to her death in 1783. Lagrange became extremely depressed after this. Following the death of Frederick II, Lagrange received offers from a few universities across Europe to leave Berlin Academy. And with the increasingly difficult climate of Berlin after Frederick's death, Lagrange ultimately accepted Louis XVI's offer and moved to the Paris Academy of Sciences in May 1787. When Lagrange got to Paris, he was even more depressed than when his wife died. Luckily, he still had a no-teaching clause when he moved, so he didn't have to face students in the depressed state. It also didn't help that the French Revolution was happening, which added fear on top of his depression. In May of 1790, after a few years of being inactive, Lagrange got involved with the development of the metric system, becoming a member of the committee commissioned to standardize weights and measures at the Academy of Sciences. He ended up working alongside many great scientists, including Antoine Lavoisier, an 18th century nobleman and chemist considered to be the father of modern chemistry. Though this brought his mood up a bit, Lagrange was still terribly depressed. And it wasn't until May of 1792 that he was really able to snap out of it. He got married to a colleague's daughter, Renée Lemonnier, the daughter of astronomer Pierre Lemonnier. Renée was actually much younger than Lagrange, getting married to him at age 24. But his sadness and timidness led her to an immense attraction to him, and she insisted that they get married. As with Vittoria, the pair did not have children, but they had a warm and loving relationship. In 1793, the Reign of Terror began, and Lavoisier helped Lagrange stay in France when a decree was passed to throw all foreigners out of the country. With the hell the Reign of Terror unleashed, the Academy was greatly affected, and the Commission for Weight Standardization was the only one that was able to continue. Lagrange became the chairman of the committee after Lavoisier and others were thrown out and executed in 1794 for being guilty of being tax farmers. The commission was ultimately completed in 1799. It's important to note that Lagrange was never actually in danger of being killed during the Reign of Terror, though he had planned an escape from France. Him being a foreigner played a part, but his political views are probably what really saved him, stating in the past, "I believe that, in general, one of the first principles of every wise man is to conform strictly to the laws of the country in which he is living, even when they are unreasonable. Due to the Reign of Terror, Lagrange's no teaching clause was now void, and he had to give lectures again. In December of 1794, Lagrange was appointed as a professor in mathematical analysis at the newly opened École Polytechnique. At this time, he was also appointed as the mathematics chair of the newly formed École Normale, giving lectures that were apparently quite elementary and not of great significance. The school was only open for about 4 months before closing, and it was then that Lagrange began giving lectures at École Polytechnique. There were many professors who enjoyed his lecture style, appreciating his very foundational approach, but it seems like his teaching was still in the poor state it was in when he had taught in Turin. Joseph Fourier, an 18th and 19th century French mathematician and physicist, notable for the creation of Fourier analysis, made the following comment on Lagrange's teaching. His voice is very feeble, at least in that he does not become heated. He has a very marked Italian accent and pronounces the S like Z. The students, of whom the majority are incapable of appreciating him, give him little welcome, but the professors make amends for it. Despite the criticism of his teaching, Lagrange still continued to give lectures and produce high-quality notes for them, with the École's policy being that lecture notes be made available for all who asked. Sophie Germain, a French mathematician and physicist notable for being one of the pioneers of elasticity theory, got her hands on these notes and began sending her work to Lagrange, under the pseudonym Monsieur Antoine Auguste Leblanc, a former student of Lagrange's. Being a woman in the 18th century, Germain was not able to attend university, so the notes and correspondence were her only way of stepping into the scientific world. Lagrange was impressed with her work and requested a meeting, to which Germain admitted to who she actually was. Thankfully, Lagrange didn't care and began mentoring her. A series of lectures Lagrange gave on differential calculus led to him publishing a couple of books. The first was in 1797, titled The Theory of Analytical Functions, which was an extension of an idea from a paper Lagrange had written in 1772, and Lagrange's hope was to try and get rid of the difficulties connected with infinities, to which philosophers at the time greatly objected to in the treatment of differential calculus. In the work, he provided a general theory of functions, where he attempted an algebraic proof of Taylor's theorem and provided applications to geometry and mechanics. While the work was quite strong, Lagrange failed to give enough attention to matters of convergence. The second work was published in 1804 and was along the same lines as the theory of analytical functions, but finally formulated Lagrange multipliers in the context of the calculus of variations with integral constraints. Another notable work that arose from the lectures Lagrange gave was Solving Numerical Equations, published in 1798. The work provided a method approximating real roots of an equation via continued fractions, and also expresses that Fermat's little theorem can be applied to give a complete algebraic solution of any binomial equation. Over the next few years, Lagrange continued to publish work in mathematics and mechanics, and began a revision of Mécanique analytique in 1810, finishing 2/3 of it before his death on April 10, 1813. Living a pretty long life considering his chronic poor health. He was buried in the Pantheon, which was the burial place for other notable figures such as Marie Curie and Pierre Curie, a scientific powerhouse of a couple from the 19th and 20th century, notable for their work in radiation, for which they received the Nobel Peace Prize for. Lagrange was survived by his wife Renée and his massively influential body of work. Well, there you have it. A brief history of one of the greatest minds to have ever lived. Though it must have been rather rough, we're fortunate that Lagrange didn't grow up wealthy, as he claimed that he probably would have stuck with law had his family been rich, and thus we would have missed out on the amazing contributions he gave to science. If you enjoyed the video, please click that like button and subscribe. And if you generally just enjoy the content of this channel, please consider supporting on Patreon. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.
Wow. It's really a constellation of, I'm just gonna call them angels. These mathematicians, scientists. And I really like just following a biography, because you can follow a biography well without the math, science background. Sing the anthem of the angels. Sing your last alone. Sing the anthem of the angels. Sing your last alone. Sing the anthem of the angels. Sing your last hello. Just gotta finish or put some karaoke practice into seemingly unrelated topics. Close your eyes, so many days go by, easy to find what's wrong, harder to find what's right. I believe in you, I can show you that I can see right through all your empty lies. I won't stay long in this world so wrong. Trembling, crawling across my skin, feeling your cold dead eyes, stealing the life of mine. I believe in you, I can show you that I can see right through all your empty lies. I won't stay long in this world so wrong. How can you see into my eyes like open doors, leading you down into my core, where I've become so numb without a soul. My spirit sleeping somewhere cold, until you find it there and lead it back home. Wake me up inside, wake me up inside. Call my name and save me from the dark. Bid my blood to run before I come undone. Save me from the nothing I've become. Now that I know what I'm without, you can't just leave me Breathe into me and make me real. Bring me to life. Wake me up inside. Wake me up inside. Call my name and save me from the dark. Bid my blood to run before I come undone. Save me from the nothing I've become. Bring me to life. Bring me to life. Frozen inside without your touch, without your love, darling. Only you are the life among the dead. Sleeping 1000 years, it seems. Got to open my eyes to everything without a thought, a voice, without a soul. Don't let me die. Bring me to life. Wake me up inside. Wake me up inside. Call my name and save me from the dark. Bid my blood to run before I come undone. Save me from the nothing I've become. Bring me to life. Bring me to life. The day we met, frozen, I held my breath. Right from the start, I knew that I'd found a home for my heart. Beats fast, colors and promises. How to be brave, How can I love when I'm afraid to fall? But watching you stand alone, all of my doubt suddenly goes away somehow. One step closer. I have died every day waiting for you. Darling, don't be afraid. I have loved you for 1,000 years. I'll love you for 1,000 more. Time stands still. Beauty and she is. I will be brave. Oh, use time. Okay, calling it now.